Welcome to Milan, Italy's second city, its economic powerhouse, and somewhere that sees its fair share of tourists. I'm just at the Duomo now and wow, it is busy. I can honestly barely pick my way through these crowds. But most tourists to Milan visit for this building, arguably very impressive, for the football, for the fashion. But there are plenty of hidden corners of Milan that lots of tourists don't visit. Now, if you've been following my channel this year, you'll know that I've done a few videos about hidden corners of London that most tourists miss. Now, in my videos, I've had my mum, who is a registered Blue Badge guide, and I have received hundreds of comments about what an incredible guide she is. Now, I do regret to inform you that she is A, not a Milan expert, and B, will not be joining me in this video. But I enjoyed finding London's hidden corners so much that I thought, can I do this for other cities I visit in Europe? I'm currently on an overland journey from London to Sicily, and 2 days ago I did a similar video in Amsterdam. This was purely done through my research alone, scouring the internet trying to find hidden corners that a lot of tourists skip over. So I filmed that in Amsterdam, and today I'm doing the same in Milan. But before I begin, I have to inform you that I am not a Milan expert. This is only my second time in the city, and the first time I was only here for a few hours. However, I love finding interesting stories and learning about the history of everywhere I go. And this is a way for both me to learn a bit more about Milan and hopefully share some of that with you. So while I'm definitely not a guide to Milan, hopefully I can share something today. Now, I'm currently at the very first place where most tourists visit when they come to Milan. So let's go somewhere a bit quieter. But first, I'm going to go into Milan's history. It all started around 600 BC when Celtic tribes founded a city here called Mediolanon. This meant middle of the plain. So, as the name suggests, it was quite strategic. But when the Romans arrived, they renamed it Mediolanum, and they built roads from here to virtually every corner of the empire. You might say in that way that Milan was the world's first roundabout. And the Roman Empire was too large to govern itself from just one place, so it split its administrative power. The western half of the empire needed a capital, and they chose Milan. For more than 100 years, this city was capital of the Western Roman Empire. Rome falls in 476 CE, and Milan immediately becomes the city that everyone wants to own. This is because whoever holds Milan holds northern Italy. So the city goes through ruler after ruler. Milan becomes a city of walls, diplomacy, and power families. In 1630, the plague tears through Milan and kills about 25% of its population. That's 1 in every 4 people. The city runs out of burial space, hospitals overflow, and losing a quarter of its population scarred the city hugely. Some of it you can still see today. But by 1700, things are looking up for Milan, but so much so that it's attracted some unwanted attention. This time it's Napoleon who wants it. In 1805, he crowns himself King of Italy right here in this region and makes Milan the new capital of Italy. But after Napoleon falls, Austria takes the city back, and it stays under Austrian control until 1859, when Milan becomes part of a unified Italy. Then comes the 20th century. Under Mussolini, this city becomes a fascist stronghold. In World War II, Milan is targeted relentlessly. It's Italy's industrial centre, its railway hub, and the engine of its economy. From 1943 to 1945, Milan is occupied by Nazi Germany, and a huge resistance movement forms in the city. And in April 1945, Milan is liberated by partisans just days before the end of the war in Italy. And after the war, Milan built faster than almost any other Italian city. And by the 1980s, fashion was exploding, factories were restarting, and it remained Italy's powerhouse and fashion capital. But let's explore some of these secret spots in Milan. We've made it to stop 1, San Bernardino alle Ossa, and this is just a 10-minute walk from the Duomo. But as you can see, there are far fewer crowds. Now, this church's history was Milan's response to disease and overcrowding, and to understand it you need to understand Milan in the 13th century. So in the 1200s, Milan was one of the fastest growing cities of Europe, and it was a really disruptive growth. Milan was constantly at war with nearby cities like Lodi and Como. It was becoming a major medical centre, which meant that it drew patients from across the region. It was rich in trade, and it was making power plays across northern Italy, and the population was exploding inside the medieval city walls with no room to expand. The sheer amount of people here meant that there was simply more death here. There was wars, childbirth, infection, famine, disease, and the city had so many people to bury and it couldn't bury them fast enough. By 1210, the main hospital, Ospedale de Brolo, was completely overwhelmed and the cemetery couldn't accommodate all the bodies.
The solution was to keep all the bodies inside a chamber.
And I believe this chamber is right here inside this church. This is the earliest version of this ossuary. Let's go and see if we can see it. Now this ossuary expanded dramatically throughout the century, largely because of the Black Death in 1348, which killed half of northern Italy's population, and the Great Plague of 1630, which killed up to 25% of Milan's population. Now when they expanded the ossuary, perceptions of death had changed a little bit. Death was around them constantly, and they decided to honour their loved ones by placing them more visibly. So they arranged the skulls and the bones in a line, just as kind of a visual language of grief almost. In 1712, a major fire destroyed the church that is here. However, the ossuary survived. I'm just looking at stop number 2, which is Verzier column.
Now, I realised while I was editing that I actually filmed completely the wrong column for this story. So I'm about to tell a very interesting story about epidemics and plagues, but it does not reference this column at all. It actually references this column, which is about a 22-minute walk away. I wasn't feeling very well on this day and my head was a bit foggy and I just completely got my columns mixed up. I'm going to carry on telling the story because I think it is an interesting historical story for Milan, but please know that it is reference to this column and not the one that I'm actually at.
It's 1630. The city is battered by war, the countryside is destabilised, and soldiers are moving through northern Italy carrying something deadlier than weapons. This was the plague, and it arrived quickly and brutally. So this wasn't the Black Death of the 1300s. This was known as the Great Plague of Milan. Milan ended up seeing 1/4 of the population dying, entire streets being quarantined, hospitals being overwhelmed, priests running last rites in the open air, and bodies being buried faster than they could be identified. Now, this was the 17th century, and we did not have the same knowledge of epidemics as we have today. So the city invented villains. A rumour spread that men were going door to door at night, smearing poison on walls to infect families. They called them untori. So 2 men ended up being accused. They were a barber called Gian Giacomo Mora and a health commissioner called Guglielmo Piazza. They were interrogated, tortured, and eventually confessed to a crime that they did not commit. They ended up being executed, and not just that, their bodies were mutilated, their property was destroyed, their land was salted so nothing could grow there again, and it was meant to be a huge warning, don't spread the plague, basically. And that brings us to this column. So this column was officially raised as a plea for divine protection. Cities across Italy built them during plagues. They were usually dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Now in 1860, these blonde plaques were added to the base, and they bear names of Milanese people who died during the 5 days of Milan uprising in 1848. This is our third stop, Palazzo Sormani. And this looks very calm, symmetrical, almost a bit quietly aristocratic. But the building has lived at least 4 entirely different lives, and each reflects a different version of Milan. It all began in the 16th century. It was commissioned by the powerful Visconti family, which was a dynasty that ruled Milan long before Italy as we know it existed. The palace shifted hands through elite families until the Sormani family acquired it in the 1700s, and that name has still stuck today. But by the 18th and 19th centuries, Milan's aristocracy hosted reading circles, political conversations, musical evenings, philosophical sparring matches, and just lots of gatherings here. Milan had loads of these salons behind doors like these. Now, in the Second World War, Milan was one of Italy's most bombed cities, and this building was heavily hit. So it was reconstructed, and as you can see now, it is one of the city's libraries. In fact, this is the Central Municipal Library of Milan. And there's even a hidden garden courtyard behind the building. So this is a really interesting example of Milan's historic architecture that's been repurposed as something that's suitable for all. And here is our next stop, Torre Velasca. So this skyscraper went up in 1958, but its story doesn't start then. It starts with a city that had just endured 20 years of fascism, World War destruction, rebuilding, identity crisis, and urgent modernisation. A lot of Milan was flattened in World War II, especially in the 1943 bombings. Entire neighbourhoods were erased, so when the city was rebuilt, architects really had to bear in mind the morale of the people. So the architects who were part of BPR, which is a Milanese collective, designed this tower, and they wanted to design something that answered the question, how does a city move forward without pretending its past never happened? As you might be able to see, the tower widens as it gets up, and this references the medieval Lombard watchtowers, which spread outward near the roof to hold defensive structures. The shape is a callback to military architecture from a time when cities had to protect themselves physically, not economically. So this tower became a symbol of neo-liberty architecture, an Italian movement that rejected international modernism. And it's also important to remember that this arrived at a moment when Italy was hustling its way right into the economic miracle era. Fiat was booming, there was construction everywhere, and Milan was really cementing itself as the financial capital of Italy. And it was even when it started being one of the fashion hubs of Europe. But opinions on this tower were split right down the middle. Some people said it's very Milan, it's brave, it's essential, we need something different. Other people said it's ugly, it's arrogant. I guess you can never please anyone, can you? I definitely know that from my YouTube comments. But yeah, it's quite an interesting, almost brutalist example of architecture. It uses raw concrete, which is supposed to reflect resilience, rebuilding, and honesty. It houses offices in the wider top floors, and these lower down floors are apartments. It's 106 meters high, and it is thought that its shape actually improves stability. All right, what do we have here? I think this is my next stop. Behind me is the Crypt of San Giovanni in Conca, which are open-air ruins. And this is what remains after 3 different versions of Milan collided. Early Christianity, medieval power politics, and 20th century urban overhaul. This used to be the basement of a church, and its story is fascinating. There was first a structure here in the 4th century when Milan was still the capital of the Western Roman Empire. Christianity had only recently been legalized, and churches were very much still experimental buildings. So this area would have been just inside the defensive perimeter of Roman Milan and surrounded by trade routes and early Christian gathering spaces. But later, a church rose above this crypt, and it became one of the most politically important religious sites in Milan. And it was where German Emperor Otto I proved his influence by intervening in church appointments. And later, the church became tied to the Visconti dynasty. This was Milan's most powerful ruling family, the ones who turned the city into a Northern European powerhouse. And they were ruthless, strategic, and obsessed with legacy. There was also a crypt below, which once housed elite burials. I'm just going to go around to see if I can see anything else. Apparently there is a sign somewhere which mentions Bastia Visconti, who was the wife of Francesco Sforza, and other nobles connected to Milan's ruling lineage. Let's see if I can see it. Ah, yes, so it looks like you can go down actually. Oh, but it does look like it's locked. Ah, okay, so it's only open on Wednesdays and Saturdays. There is a bit of information here saying that the basilica is situated on the ruins of a Roman age residential quarter, deconstructed by the Austrians. A few parts of the 11th century church have survived up to the present day. So if you are in Milan, this video will probably be out after these dates. Looks like it's open on Saturdays and Wednesdays, or you could pop by when you arrive and see when it's open during your stay. But the other thing that is worth mentioning about this basilica is that it actually disappeared. The basilica above it was demolished in the 1940s and 50s. And post-World War II, Milan was in full reconstruction mode. So the church was removed, but the crypt remained. So this is a crypt without a church in the middle of Milan. Right, we have just got time and energy, I think, for one more stop which should show you a bit more of modern Milan. Now, before we get to it, I just want to say this video very nearly didn't happen today, and it was supposed to be quite a lot longer, but I had a pretty nightmare day yesterday. So as I mentioned, I was in Amsterdam 2 days ago, and yesterday I was actually in Vienna. I'm taking 3 night trains in a row, so I did Amsterdam, Vienna, Vienna, Milan, and then tonight I'm doing Milan to Palermo. On my night train from Amsterdam to Vienna, well, I woke up in the morning and I felt super nauseous. I threw up in the toilet of the train twice, and I spent yesterday in a hotel room in Vienna wondering if I should carry on with my journey or if I was ill and I should go home. I've had an incredibly busy 7 weeks now. I've been to Australia, I've been to Bangladesh, I've had a travel conference. It's been go. So I wasn't sure if I should call the whole trip off. Anyway, I didn't call the whole trip off, as you can see. I do feel a lot better today, but I'm still a bit weary. Like I can feel that I need to go back to the hotel and rest a bit before my bus tonight, which is why I am cutting this video a little bit short. If you really like it, let me know. I can always come back to Milan for round 2, I'm sure. When I was thinking about going home, I was just thinking I really want to do this series of videos. You know, I'd planned it quite meticulously and I really didn't want to see it all go to waste. So I soldiered on. I am here. I'm not feeling the best, and it would really mean the world if you could like this video, comment on this video, subscribe if you haven't already. Took a lot of mental fortitude to be here today. So I really hope you like the video. Right, we're just gonna cross over here. I can see where I'm going. So this is the Piazza Affari, the home of Italy's main stock exchange, the Borsa Italiana. So the building here was completed in 1932 at the height of the fascist era. It was built to communicate fascist power, basically. And then ultimately, Milan put this in front of it. So this sculpture is called LOVE, and it's by Italian artist Maurizio Cattelan, and it was installed in 2010. Officially, the letters stand for Libertà, which means freedom, Odio, which means hate, Vendetta, which means revenge, and Eternità, which means eternity. But unofficially, Milan calls it El Dito, which means the finger. And the really interesting bit of detail is that the fingers aren't curled, they're cut off. And it's only the middle finger that remains upright and unbothered. The sculpture appeared just 2 years after the 2008 financial crisis, when trust in banks, governments and institutions was basically on the floor. It was when people were struggling, systems seemed untouchable, and this statue was just sort of saying it out loud. I'm sorry, I think I made a mistake earlier. This is really interesting. So it's not aimed at us. I said before that this was the stock exchange. I don't think it is a stock exchange. This is the stock exchange. So the building right behind me here. So the middle finger is aimed at the stock exchange. And interestingly, the statue is made from Carrara marble, which was the same stone Michelangelo used for David. And David was the underdog who toppled a giant. So I don't know if that is relevant or a coincidence. Now, it caused absolute outrage when it was first unveiled. Bankers called it insulting, politicians called it shameful, and it was meant to stay here for 2 weeks. But the backlash is why it became permanent. It exposed the kind of fragility in the system, and the people of Milan learnt to love it. Right, and that is me done on this Hidden Gems in Milan tour. Like I say, there was a lot more that I could have included, but I had to factor in the time and the energy that I've got. As always, I will be writing a full blog post with all of the locations to these hidden gems, and I'll put in the other ones that I had on the list as well. You can see that by scanning this QR code or heading to the link in the description. If you're sticking around, I recommend checking out this video about the hidden gems in Amsterdam that I found. It's really interesting, even if you're not planning a trip there. You might be by the time you've watched it. And next time I'll be taking the train from this city down to Sicily in the very south of the country. So please subscribe if you'd like to see that, and I hope to see you there. Bye.